Joining us now on Pod Save the UK to chat through a whirlwind first week in office is Substack superstar, it says.
Is that something you can be? I don't know.
I don't know, but if you're looking for a wrestling name, I think we might have found it. It's policy expert and political commentator Sam Freedman. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you very much for having me.
The Substack superstar.
Substack superstar, yeah.
So, Sam, over the last year, we've been spending a lot of our energy laughing at the Tories. Obviously, you're taking a much more serious approach in your Substack and the new book.
I mean, there's a bit of laughing at them as well.
yeah.
It would be rude not to.
Yeah.
But generally, you know, you're providing a more serious take in your book, Failed State. I mean, as names go, it's a pretty serious title. The country is indeed in a difficult place. The government have their work cut out for them. I wanted to ask you, you've probably heard Rachel Reeves' comments saying that, you know, the finances are as bad as after World War II. Do you agree with that?
It depends what you mean, as ever, but I think they're in a pretty bad way. Our debt as a country is as big as it's been for 40, 50 years. We're still borrowing a very large amount of money every year. And there's a huge amount of need across so many public services. I think this is the bit that Labour are really going to struggle with, is that you can go department by department across all of government, and every single one of them has a really good case for needing a lot more money spent on its core priorities. And there's no way to square that circle without putting up taxes considerably or risking putting up borrowing to the point where the markets don't appreciate it. So yeah, it's a very tricky financial position to be in.
There was talk during the campaign from Keir Starmer about a sort of decade of renewal, which, you know, suggests there's a plan that goes across two parliaments. What would you say in terms of just looking at the life cycle of this next parliament are the most fundamental challenges? Yeah,
I mean, I think you've got quite a few areas where you've got an immediate crisis. Essentially, prisons is a great example. There is no space in prisons, so you've got to take a decision straight away on that. Doctor strike is a good example. Yeah. There is still a junior doctor strike where Streeting has said straight away he wants to try and resolve that. If they can, that's going to help, but it will cost money to resolve. Workforce issues are pretty much everywhere you look, you know, prisons, NHS, but also schools, local government, nurseries, social care. So you've got a bunch of stuff that's absolutely immediate, and there are a bunch of sort of quick things that you can do to start to alleviate those, like resolving the doctor strike, and some that you're going to have to do, like sort of early release for prisoners, which no one really wants. But it's sort of what my book is about, sort of saying, okay, but for the really, like the long term, how do you actually sustainably create a stronger system where this stuff doesn't keep happening and you don't keep getting into crisis? I think you need to look at the way the state actually functions. Things like the way Parliament works, the way the civil service works, the way that we're just an incredibly centralised country and we have very weak local and regional government. All of those kinds of deep structural issues. And that does take a decade to change if you're serious about changing it.
Forgive me for being naive, but how can you resolve that without more money? I mean, in terms of decentralising government, you know, for example, like I grew up in Croydon, and Croydon Council is essentially bankrupt. There's a campaign that started at the moment to try and keep the library that I essentially grew up getting books from, reading books, spending time in when I was a kid, is essentially about to shut down. There's a campaign going to try and keep it open. But how do you decentralise power into local councils that are all seemingly on the verge of bankruptcy?
So one question is, why are they all on the verge of bankruptcy? And the reason is they're completely dependent on national government to provide their funding, and national government hasn't provided enough for quite a while, so they're now in real trouble. So there's two ways you could try and resolve that. One is to say, well, we just need to bail them out and give them more money. The other way is to say, over time, you want regions to be able to tax themselves, to raise their own money for their own services. Why is it that whether it's Croydon or London or, you know, Manchester has to go to the government cap in hand to be able to keep a library open? Why can't they say, we actually want to put council tax up more, or we want to have a local tourist tax? You know, we are very unusual in not having the ability, local government not having the ability to raise any money. Every other developed country, you go to America, states can raise it, they have their own taxes. Go to Germany, states have their own taxes. And that gives them some scope to deal with this stuff. Ours are just completely dependent on the centre.
So let's talk a little bit about the battle for Tory leader.
Yes.
So likely contenders are Suella Braverman, Robert Jenrick, Tom Tugendhat, Victoria Atkins, Kemi Badenoch, James Cleverly. all of them tainted by the stench of the previous government and probably not some of our favourites. I think it's fair to say on this show. What do you make of the contenders, and what does it tell us about where the Conservative Party might go?
Well, it's 8% of the Tory party left that are running for the leadership, which is a good start. I mean, I think that you can already start to see the contours of the contest. Mm-hmm. You're going to have somebody representing the right of the party. I would say probably the favourite for that slot at the moment is Robert Jenrick, but that could change. And then you're going to have somebody else. And who that somebody else is going to be really critical in deciding the
contours. Robert Jenrick represents the... Didn't Suella Braverman say he was left?
Yes, they have been having quite an entertaining fight this week. It's always good when the worst people argue with each other. But she was sort of indicating he's a sort of left-wing Remainer, which if Robert Jenrick is a left-wing Remainer, then God knows where she now is. But I think actually what she has done this week is essentially knock herself out of the race by being so extreme. So I think you've got Jenrick and Priti Patel fighting for a slot on the right-wing slot, if you like. Of the people who see reform as the main threat. And then there'll be somebody else. Now, is that going to be someone who would consider themselves more moderate, like Tom Tugendhat or Victoria Atkins, or is it going to be Kemi Badenoch, who I think is often lumped in on the right of the party, but actually I think has positioned herself more across the party with different groups. So I think probably that's going to be like, for the MPs, the thing they have to decide. Do you put Badenoch up against Jenrick and Patel, in which case she might have a chance of winning and stopping the right, or do you put up someone like Tugendhat or Atkins and they probably won't win with the membership?
Right.
And then you might be left with Robert Jenrick running the party. So I think that's the kind of calculation that will be going on for the more moderate Tory MPs.
This is a sort of problem, isn't it? Because the moderate Conservative Party can talk all it wants about the need to tack to the centre, the need to emphasise one nation conservatism. But at the end of the day, unless there is a rule change, the next Tory leader is going to be elected by the membership. And just this morning, as we record on Wednesday, a poll has suggested that almost half of the Tory members want some kind of merger with Reform UK. Doesn't that mean that someone like Tom Tugendhat or Victoria Atkins, their kind of race is run even before...
So I mean, I think there is a real danger for MPs in putting someone like that through to the last two, that they just won't be able to win, however well they perform, etc. It's much riskier, let's put it that way. Whereas if they put someone like Badenoch through, who has very clearly said she doesn't want to bring Farage into the party, she doesn't want to merge with the Reform, you get someone who does have appeal to the right, but isn't going to kind of go that far. So that's kind of why I think she might end up as almost being the unity candidate, if you like.
Sorry, that was just Kemi Badenoch, the unity.
I know. It's a strange way of thinking about the race, but it's the way that they will be thinking about it, I think.
Just before we go, I have a question for you about Reform, because I can't understand the terms of this story. I read it, then I read people saying that it's not true. I don't quite know what's happened here. There are allegations that of Reform's 605 candidates, some of them may not have been real, like a sort of Deliveroo ghost kitchen, like a restaurant that only exists just in the app on real life. It's been alleged that Reform served up ghost candidates in order to kind of show that they were competing in the maximum number of races. So they stood 605 candidates out of 650 constituencies. There are now allegations swirling that some of them don't exist. Now, I can't tell whether this is based on actual intelligence or information gathered, or whether one of the candidates just looks like an AI generated.
So I think what happened, well, exactly, one of the candidates who is real, doctored his photo.
Yes, that's right.
And made his photo look like it was AI generated, which then set off this kind of conspiracy theory. As far as I can tell, there is no evidence that any of the Reform candidates were not real. Yeah. What it does, I think, tell us is that lots of them were really paper candidates. They didn't do any campaigning. Yeah. They might be a real person that exists somewhere, but they did no campaigning. And certainly, perhaps weren't expecting to do as well as they did in some cases. And I think that is an issue for Reform, in that they don't really have any party infrastructure. And if they want to become a real threat on the right to the Conservatives, which I think we should probably all be hoping they don't, that they will have to build more of an infrastructure. And Nigel Farage isn't very good at that. He didn't do that with UKIP. Didn't do that with the Brexit Party. Now, this is a very odd party because he owns it outright. It's a company that he owns.
I sort of feel like that hasn't quite been discussed sufficiently.
Yes.
It is quite a strange... It is certainly an outrider in British politics.
I mean, I'm not aware of any party, certainly not one that's come anywhere near to winning this many votes that is set up like that. And it does raise some really big questions about how you then become a proper political party, if that is their goal, over the next few years. Though I did see they've just appointed Lee Anderson as their chief whip. And as he left his last two parties, I'm not sure I would have made him my first choice for loyalty boss. But so we'll see how they do. But it is an odd setup, even if this particular story about made-up candidates has not been shown to be accurate.
Sam, thank you so much for joining us on Pod Save UK.
Thank you.
It's been such a pleasure to see you. I'm now going to hold up a copy of this book.
Yes.
Sam's book, Failed State, is out today, and I'm very much looking forward to reading it.